BBC.
Yeah, on the BBC.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, I'm going to move straight on to my next story. I'm very keen on this story. We are going to talk about a new book called Bringing Down Goliath, and it was by the fox-killing lawyer, the lefty lawyer Jolyon Maugham. It's sort of his biography. It's rather virtue-signalling. It's full of his own greatness. He mentions that he's a KC, King's Counsel, about 50 times in the entire book. Some people are saying if it's not the worst book ever written, it's certainly got the worst opening sentence ever written. Going to talk now to someone who has enjoyed reading the book. I can't say that I have, but I've enjoyed reading the dreadful reviews. A warm welcome to Elijah Granet, who's a writer. Hello, Elijah.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
How did you find Jolyon's book?
I found it at first just unbearable. Each sentence was sort of like pulling teeth. It is barely a book as much as it's a collection of odd anecdotes. It's a lot of things about how he felt after sending tweets and emotions. And then I did something terrible. I read it again.
And you read it again?
I still have forgiven myself.
What are you, some sort of masochist?
I know, and I'm not glad I did in that it was painful, but I'm glad I did in that once I was able to sort of get all the laughs out, the ideas that are in this book, and shockingly there are some ideas, are kind of horrifying. It's the ideas of someone who thinks the law should be dictated entirely by what he thinks is right, and a good judge is someone who agrees with him, and a bad judge is someone who does it. And it is, in that sense, a doubly disturbing book, both for the prose and actually the content.
Yes, a lot of lawyers, I mean, not all of them, but quite a few lawyers, barristers, are not very good writers, but for this reason, that they're schooled in precise judicial language, legal language, legalese, which isn't beautiful, but it's precise. So you've got a lot of repetition, long, winding sentences, punctuation. It's hideous, but it delivers a very, very legally precise message, and that leaves lawyers often being very poor writers when they try and write anything else. And it sounds to me as if Jolyon Maugham is one of those. So this was a review in the Spectator by Gareth Roberts, and the headline on it was, Jolyon Maugham's opening sentence might be the worst of all time. I'll read it to you. This is the sentence. I'm with my colleague Ali Ross, so he'll get involved in this. He's a very good writer, and I'm sure you are too, Elijah. So what do we make of this? The life I have is hard, but I got to choose it, and the road that brought me here, I did not. What does that mean?
That sounds like a Beatles lyric when they hit the LSD, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, what do you think that means, Elijah?
I think it means he missed out on his true career, which was designing the sort of inane posters teachers would have on the wall to try to motivate students, because that is about the same level of content. And it is so odd, but it is also so self-absorbed. And he likes these little declaratory sentences where he just shows off about how wonderful he is. He at one point says, I consider myself brave, or something to that effect in the book. He just
That's four references to himself in that one sentence.
Yeah, my friend Ali is pointing out here, Elijah, there are 4 references to himself in the first sentence.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's astonishing, and it is a immensely self-absorbed book, and in that sense it's almost false advertising, because very little of the book is about anything legal he's done in particular, and most of the legal parts aren't actually about successfully taking on the government.
Yeah, in the Times review, Yuan Yi Zhu, he's an Oxford academic, he wrote that the first sentence was unforgivable, and it was kind of downhill from there. And he said something about this book is a literary crime that Mr. Maugham should be encouraged not to repeat.
The danger here is I'm now thinking, I want to read this.
Yeah, I mean...
I'm not going to buy it, that's for sure, but...
Would that be the case, Elijah, that it's a sort of almost car crash bad? Well, you read it twice, presumably to confirm to yourself that it really was that bad.
The problem is that the joke gets old pretty quickly, that there's only so much of it you can take, and I think even if you tried to play a drinking game with this, you would end up passed out a few chapters in. The fun really is lost by repetition.
Yeah, and one review said, was it all the right words are there, but not necessarily in the right order. Would you say, I mean, I've sort of trailed this as certainly the worst book of the year, but arguably maybe the worst book ever written?
Alistair Campbell's got a new one out, though, hasn't he? So let's not be too hasty.
Yeah, that's true. What do you reckon, Elijah?
That's true, although it's barely a book. A book usually has a thesis, an argument, a narrative. This book goes from telling you about the time he killed the fox to explaining the legal system in successive chapters. It's a picaresque series of anecdotes that goes nowhere, and the anecdotes aren't entertaining.
And I should say there are 318 pages of this dross.
Forget it.
318 pages.
I'm out.
I mean, this guy seems to think he's the greatest lawyer who ever lived. He runs this thing called the Good Law Project, which is basically a way that he sues the government, the fascist, right-wing, evil Tory government that he hates so much. He keeps suing them to try to ruin their policies, but he always fails. The Good Law Project never succeeds. And of course, Elijah, he also got involved in a massive row about it with J.K. Rowling, because being the sort of self-regarding narcissist that he clearly is, he said that the reason the Times gave it such a bad review was because the Times is a right-wing newspaper and he's left-wing. He doesn't hold a mirror to himself very stridently, does he?
No, and it reflects a sort of narcissistic, conspiratorial outlook. I mean, I gave it a bad review, and if my Murdoch check is going to come in, I haven't gotten in the post yet. So I really think that this idea that people are somehow all conspiring to get him, rather than it might be, if no one likes your book, it isn't very good. It's not a hard concept for him to grasp.
Why did you read it twice? Was it just to check that it was quite as bad as you thought? Because you had to write a review, and I suppose sometimes if you read a book you think, that's the worst thing I've ever written, am I being fair? Is that why you went back to it?
Yeah, I went into this not liking him, but I thought there are ideas here. I can engage with them. I mean, this is the lawyerly thing. You try to look at it separated from the context of the people and just the context of the facts. And when I started looking at just the ideas, I found that he is a frankly disgraceful view of law. He is the view of law built around good judges and bad judges, and good judges agree with him. And when judges rule conservatively and don't allow things outside procedure, if it's in his favor, he loves it. And if it's against it, he starts speculating that, for example, he speculates one judge might have ruled against him because she was older and a woman, and therefore likely to be the kind of feminist he doesn't like.
That's outrageous. Just the last line, Elijah. I don't know if you're an animal lover, but I am. I've never forgiven him for clubbing a fox to death on Boxing Day. He's so sort of blind to possible mistakes that he might make, that he sort of proudly put that on Twitter. He said, and he apparently went out into his back garden because there was a fox bothering his chickens or something, and he went out wearing only his wife's kimono, an unnecessary detail I would have thought. The mind boggles. Don't like to think of that image, but he went out and clubbed this fox to death and put on Twitter, I've just wearing my wife's kimono, I've just clubbed a fox to death who was bothering my chickens. How's your Boxing Day going? And the pile-on he got on Twitter went on for weeks. He didn't see there might be a problem in revealing that awful moment of animal cruelty.
And he still doesn't. He defends that in the book. And it tells you a lot about his very one-track mind. that he saw a suffering animal and thought the only option, he didn't try to extricate it, didn't try to move it. The only option was to club it to death. And looking back, he still, in hindsight, can't reflect on another option.
Yeah, well, damn him for that. I hate him for that. And I'm going to have a look at this book now, I'm afraid, with some trepidation, but I will be having a read of it. It won't be enjoyable, but I'll give it a go. Great to talk to you, Elijah. Thank you very much for your help. That's Elijah Granet, writer, who's read Jolyon Moore's book twice. Extraordinary story. The worst book of the year, maybe the worst book ever.